The sky split open without warning, a searing white line etching across the dawn like a god's careless knife. Major Elena Park was in the command center's lower bunker, nursing a lukewarm coffee and reviewing drone feeds from the Pacific Rim when the world shuddered. Alarms wailed, red lights pulsing like blood in veins. The strike hit the upper levels first, orbital lances precise as scalpels, vaporizing the satellite arrays and command nodes in a chain of fireballs that bloomed over Seoul, Washington, Beijing, and a dozen other hubs. Elena's ears rang from the concussive wave that followed, dust sifting from the ceiling as the bunker groaned. She scrambled to her feet, the coffee mug shattering under her boot. "Status!" she barked into the comms, but static hissed back. The Joint Brigade's nerve center, a fortified sprawl under the Korean mountains, had been one of the targets. Bodies slumped in the corridors above, but down here, in the reinforced sublevels, survival was a crapshoot. Elena grabbed her sidearm and helmet, her mind already triaging. Assess damage, rally survivors, deny the enemy a clean decapitation. By the time she clawed her way to the auxiliary ops room, the announcement was broadcasting on every intact frequency. A voice, metallic and layered with translation algorithms, emanated from the Zerathi Dominion's orbital relays. Humanity of Earth, your aggressive expansion into neutral sectors has provoked this disciplinary measure. We claim limited occupation of key nodes to enforce compliance. Resist and escalation follows. Yield and order prevails. Elena spat a curse in Korean, her breath fogging the cracked visor. The screens flickered with aftermath, craters where bases had stood, smoke plumes rising like accusations. Her brigade, cobbled from UN rapid response units, a mix of Americans, Koreans, Indians, and more, was scattered, but not broken. Not yet. A lieutenant, face smeared with grime, saluted shakily. "Ma'am, we've got partial links to outlying units. High command's gone dark, but a relay from Brussels patched through. You're to form a mobile spearhead. Guerrilla ops, hit and run on their landing zones." She nodded, the weight of it settling like wet sand in her gut. Elena Park, 42 and scarred from too many failed interventions, Somalia, the Arctic skirmishes, had sworn she'd never let another command dissolve into chaos. But here it was, aliens from the stars dictating terms, their ships ghosting in atmosphere like silver specters. "Get me a roster of able bodies, vehicles, munitions, whatever's left. We move in 2 hours." Across the Atlantic, in the sterile halls of the Geneva Xenobiology Institute, Dr. Arun Mehta was mid-lecture when the strike's shockwave rattled the windows. His slides on interstellar signaling froze on the projector as students bolted for doors. Arun, ever the academic, paused only to secure his tablet before joining the exodus. The Institute's basement lab became an impromptu shelter, but his mind raced ahead. He'd been tracking Zerathi probe signatures for months. Arrogant empire builders, their tech a blend of quantum drives and psionic interfaces that made human physics look like child's play. By evening, as emergency beacons lit the Swiss skyline, a black SUV screeched into the loading dock. 2 stern-faced agents from the Global Defense Directorate hauled him aboard. "Dr. Mehta, you're needed at Forward Ops. We've captured signal fragments from their fleet." Arun adjusted his glasses, the adrenaline sharpening his thoughts. "Captured how? Their encryption doesn't matter. Decode it. They're not glassing the planet, and we need to know why." The drive blurred through checkpoints, Arun's laptop open on his knees. The fragments were raw, bursts of modulated light pulses laced with what he suspected was emotional resonance coding. Zerathi didn't just communicate, they broadcast intent. As the SUV bounced toward a hidden rally point, Arun's fingers flew. The signals hinted at restraint, orders to limit to probationary crossing, a test of wills rather than total war. But beneath it, a shadow, escalation protocols if humans prove too resilient. He leaned back, a flicker of triumph warring with dread. Understanding them could save lives, or arm the wrong hands. Arun had always seen war as equations to balance, but this was rewriting the variables of extinction. Aboard the Dominion's lead cruiser, Kale Rith stood on the command dais, his iridescent scales shifting from azure to a subdued gray under the holographic displays. The orbital strikes had been surgical, as intended. Hubs neutralized, no widespread fallout. His brood siblings would approve. The High Council demanded efficiency without the mess of annihilation. Kale Rith, a century into service, had led suppressions on a dozen fringe worlds, always with the leash of restraint. Full genocide bred rebels, intimidation forged subjects. The incoming directive scrolled across his neural implant, crisp and unyielding. Secure infrastructure nodes, ports, power grids, comms relays. Avoid civilian mass casualties. Demonstrate dominance through precision. Let them see the cost of defiance, but not the abyss. Kale Rith's mandibles clicked softly in affirmation, though doubt gnawed at the edges of his resolve. Humans were anomalies, fractious, inventive, their broadcasts a cacophony of defiance even now. Seizing their coastal logistics hubs would choke supply lines, force compliance. But if they adapted, his status hung on success. Failure meant exile for his clutch. Their shared legacy unraveled. He turned to his second, a lithe scout named Vera. Deploy ground teams to the primary nodes. Phased containment fields only. No plasma sweeps unless engaged. Vera's eyes gleamed. They scatter like vermin, Commander. This will break them. Kale Rith hoped so. Restraint was civilization's blade, sharp but double-edged. Push too hard, and even the manageable turned feral. In the rubble of Long Beach Harbor, Sergeant Maya Alvarez dragged her brother's body from the twisted wreckage of the cargo crane. The Zerathi strike had been a lance of coherent energy, slicing through the port like butter. Targeted, they said, to cripple shipping without flooding the bay. But Javier hadn't been cargo. He'd been on watch, a reservist pulled in for the alert. His chest was caved in, eyes staring at the smoke-choked sky. Maya knelt, her gloved hands trembling as she closed his lids. 24, with dreams of engineering school after his tour. Lo siento, hermano, she whispered, the words tasting like ash. Grief hit like a suppressed round, sharp, contained, ready to burst. Around her, fires crackled, survivors shouting for medevacs that wouldn't come. The announcement still echoed from salvaged radios. Compliance or escalation. She stood, wiping blood from her cheek. Hers or his, she couldn't tell. Her unit, the 7th Engineer Battalion, was en route to a rally point near the Rockies, but Maya had other plans. When the call came for volunteers to Major Park's spearhead, sabotage ops deep behind enemy lines, she was first in line. Sign me up, she told the comms officer, voice steady as rebar. Those bastards want payback, I'll deliver it. Ports, ships, whatever they land on, I'll wire it to hell. The officer hesitated. This is high risk, Alvarez. No extraction guarantees. Good, means I get close. Maya slung her pack. The weight of demoed charges a grim comfort. Her flaw had always been the fire, hot, unyielding, but losing Javier? It forged it into something colder. She'd fight for Elena's strategies, for the brigade's grit. But deep down the vow burned. Any cost, even if it numbed her to the bone. Miles south, in the shadowed sprawl of what used to be San Diego's outskirts, Tess Park huddled with a dozen neighbors in the gutted shell of an apartment block. The city had been tagged as a Zerathi logistics node. Docks for their shuttle swarms, warehouses for whatever godforsaken gear they brought. Patrols swept the streets now, sleek drones humming like hornets, their scanners probing for heat signatures. Tess, 16 and wiry from years of track meets, had taken charge when the adults froze. Her mom was out there somewhere, a major in the brigade, but comms were jammed. Stay low, she hissed to Mrs. Chen, the elderly widow clutching a rosary. They move in grids, 2 minutes per block. We shift when the hum fades. The group, teens like her, elders too frail to run, had pooled what they could. Canned goods from a looted pantry, blankets from abandoned cars. Tess's phone was dead, but she'd sketched patrol patterns on a scrap of drywall, predicting gaps. Resentment simmered. Mom always prioritized the uniform over family, Evac zones be damned. Now Tess was the one holding lines, organizing whispers into plans. A kid named Rico tugged her sleeve. What if they find us? They won't, Tess said, forcing steel into her voice. But inside, fear coiled. Irrational, sharp, the kind that made her want to bolt for the hills alone. Instead, she peered through a crack in the wall, watching a patrol glide past. Hidden, for now. Survival wasn't heroism. It was this. Quiet defiance, one breath at a time. Elena's spearhead convoy snaked through mountain passes. 2 days later, a ragged convoy of armored trucks and jury-rigged drones evading orbital eyes. She rode in the lead vehicle, poring over sat-snatched intel on a battered tablet. The brigade was down to a few hundred effectives. Engineers like Alvarez, scouts, a handful of Xenotech advisors. Arun Mehta sat across from her, his face gaunt under the dim cab light. "We've got a partial intercept," he said, sliding the tablet over. "Their command packet, it's layered, but the core translates to probationary crossing. This isn't full invasion, it's a test. Push back too hard, and they unleash Phase 2. Something worse, fleet scale, maybe bioagents." Elena's jaw tightened. The hook sank deep. Resist effectively, invite ruin. Her daughter's face flashed. Tess in that coastal hellhole, a node they couldn't touch without tipping the scales. Command had marked the zones for precision strikes. Civilians be damned if it disrupted logistics. But Elena knew. A hurried text before the blackout. "Mom, we're hiding. Don't come." She deleted the thread, heart pounding. Telling High Command would make Tess an asset, leverage for a demo strike, or worse, bait. No. Elena pocketed the tablet, meeting Arun's gaze. "Keep decoding. We hit their nodes smart. Disrupt, don't destroy. Buy time." But as the convoy crested a ridge, Zerathi's shuttles glinting on the horizon, Elena's choice weighed heavier. Duty to humanity meant risks. Love meant secrets. In war's grind, both could shatter. Alvarez leaned in from the back, eyes hard. "Orders, ma'am." "Forward," Elena said, voice like gravel. "We adapt or we break." The engines roared, carrying them into the unknown, where restraint met ferocity and survival demanded everything. The convoy rumbled through the mist-shrouded outskirts of the Rhine Valley, Elena's armored personnel carrier leading the pack like a blunt knife edge. She gripped the tactical display strapped to her thigh, eyes flicking between the holographic map and the rain-smeared viewport. Her brigade, a ragged mix of European NATO remnants and Asian rapid response teams, had been chasing this Zerathi column for hours, shadows in the downpour. The aliens' ground forces moved predictably, heavy walkers scouting ahead, supply skimmers trailing like obedient hounds. Predictable until they weren't. 2 clicks out, Elena murmured into her comms, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. The failure in Seoul still clawed at her. Civilians caught in crossfire because she'd hesitated on a drone strike. Not again. "Flankers, hold position. We'll hit them at the Narrows." Affirmatives crackled back, laced with static and exhaustion. Sergeant Alvarez's voice cut through clearest. "Engineers ready, ma'am. Charges set on the overpass." Elena nodded to herself, visualizing the trap. The Zerathi column was funneling through a flooded ravine, their exosuits gleaming under the gray sky, tall insectoid frames that hummed with stolen momentum. Intel said they recycled impacts, turning bullets into shields. But rivers didn't punch, they eroded. The lead walker crested the rise, its 6 legs splaying for balance on the slick road. Elena's finger hovered over the trigger relay. Now! Missiles streaked from concealed positions, along the embankment, slamming into the walker's torso. The beast shuddered but didn't crumple. Energy webs flared across its plating, absorbing the blasts and firing back in arcing pulses that vaporized a nearby Humvee. Screams echoed over the line as shrapnel rained. "Conventionals bouncing," Elena barked, ducking as a return shot scorched the air above her carrier. "Switch to EMP bursts, disrupt the recyclers." Her gunners adjusted, but the Zerathi adapted faster. The column surged forward, walkers pivoting with eerie precision, their plasma lances carving through the underbrush. One of her flank teams took a direct hit. The explosion lit the mist like a false dawn. Elena's jaw tightened. 8 souls gone, just like that. She slammed the override, directing her carrier's cannon to rake the lead walker's joints. Sparks flew, but the suit whirred, converting the kinetic barrage into a counter-thrust that propelled it leaping toward her position. "Pull back," she ordered, heart pounding as the carrier's treads chewed mud to evade. The ambush was crumbling. The aliens' tech turned their aggression against them. But then Maya's voice broke through, sharp and unyielding. "Bridge going down. Get clear." Elena glanced at the map. The canal bridge ahead, a relic of pre-war infrastructure, spanned a swollen tributary. Maya and her engineers had rigged it with scavenged thermite and demo packs, not for the road, but the water below. The first walker lumbered onto the span, its weight testing the girders. A second followed, scanners sweeping for threats. Detonation ripped the air. The bridge buckled in a groan of twisted metal, pylons snapping like bones. The lead walker teetered, servos whining as it tried to retract, but momentum betrayed it. It plunged into the churning canal below, followed by 2 more in a cascade of flailing limbs and spraying foam. Water surged around their sinking forms, hissing against hot armor. Elena watched from the viewport, breath caught. The walkers thrashed. Emergency seals failing as the current clawed at joints. Bubbles erupted, corrosion fast and vicious. One suit split open with a muffled crack, spilling bioluminescent fluid that clouded the water. The column halted, rear units firing wildly into the ravine. But the damage was done. 3 down, and the survivors hesitated, their advance stalled by the flood. "Regroup on me," Elena said, exhaling slowly. Her hands trembled on the controls, the weight of the wind bitter. They'd bought time, but at what cost? The valley reeked of ozone and wet earth, a graveyard for both sides. Maya Alvarez wiped mud from her face, crouched behind a shattered concrete barrier on the canal's edge. The demo had worked better than planned. The water's conductivity amplified the corrosion, eating through the Zerathi seals like acid on foil. But her team was down to half strength. Private Ruiz had been too close when the bridge gave way, his scream cut short by the collapse. "Clear the wrecks," she ordered the survivors, her voice rough from shouting over the rain. Grief for her brother flickered, another loss in this endless grind, but she shoved it down. Improvise or die. That's what Elena had drilled into them. She waded into the shallows, rifle slung, pulling a fragment of armor from the muck. It was lighter than expected, iridescent under the downpour, but pitted where the water had gnawed. Seals compromised. If Rivers could do this. "Bag it for intel," she told Corporal Lee, who nodded grimly, his arm bandaged from shrapnel. Maya glanced back at the carrier where Elena directed the mop-up. Loyalty burned in her chest. The commander saw them as people, not cannon fodder, but as alien fire probed the mist. Maya wondered how long that fire in Elena wouldn't turn cold. Back at the forward base, a gutted warehouse on the river's bend, Dr. Aaron Mehta hunched over a makeshift lab table, the recovered armor shard glowing faintly under UV lamps. The air hummed with generators and the low murmur of wounded being triaged. Elena had dropped off the fragment hours ago, her face etched with the ambush's toll before vanishing into a strategy holocall. Arun adjusted his magnifier, tracing the corrosion patterns. Zerathi exosuits were marvels, self-repairing metamaterials that harvested kinetic energy for shields and propulsion. But water. It wasn't just immersion. The Earth's rivers carried minerals and electrolytes that shorted the nanoseals, accelerating breakdown. Conductive pathways like veins in a body. He cross-referenced scans from earlier strikes. "Scalable," he muttered, typing furiously. The planet's hydrosphere, rivers, deltas, coastal networks could be turned against them. Flood barriers, induced currents via grounded cables, even weaponized monsoons in monsoon belts. Not elegant, but effective. Human ingenuity born of desperation. A flaw nagged him: arrogance. He'd always seen war as equations, aliens as puzzles to solve. But this, arming militias with environmental kill switches, felt like handing children matches. Recognition tempted, a breakthrough that could end the incursion. Yet the cost. He pushed the thought aside, finalizing his report. Elena needed this yesterday. Aboard the Zerathi command skimmer, hovering above the fractured European theater, Cale Rith stared at the holographic replay of the ambush. His mandibles clicked softly in agitation, the chamber's dim blue light casting shadows on his exosuit's ceremonial etchings. The humans had drowned 3 walkers in a mud-choked canal, primitive yet devastating. Their ingenuity mocked the Dominion's assumptions, soft-skinned primates, easily cowed. "Sub-Commander," he addressed the officer at the console, voice resonant through his translator implant. "Compile losses, include the Rhine engagement." Reports scrolled. Disrupted supply lines, corroded units, human traps exploiting terrain. The High Council's orders were clear. Disciplinary force, no massacres to avoid galactic scrutiny. Intimidation, not extermination. But these vermin adapted, turning water against alloy. Cale Rith's brood siblings would whisper of weakness if he faltered. Loyalty demanded obedience, yet admiration stirred for the humans' ferocity. Echoes of Zerathi expansion wars where restraint had forged empires. He straightened. Initiate counter-sweeps, target hydro nodes, dams, purification sites. Escalate patrols, but hold the line. No orbital strikes without clearance. Stretch them thin. The sub-commander hesitated. "And if they weaponize further?" "Then we respond in kind," Cale Rith said, masking his doubt. Restraint was cracking. The Council might deem full protocols necessary. He turned to the viewport, Earth's blue marble mocking his resolve. In the shadowed alleys of Busan's evacuated waterfront, Tess Park peered through a cracked window, her breath fogging the glass. The Zerathi Tower rose like a skeletal spire in the district square, water purification unit, humming as it drew from the harbor to desalinate for their troops. Patrols had tripled since its arrival, walkers clanking past barricades, drones buzzing overhead. Her group huddled in the derelict apartment, 5 teens and 2 elders, scavenging what they could from ration drops. Old Mr. Kim clutched a radio, static hissing with fragmented news. Lena, a wiry girl with bandaged hands, whispered, "We hit it! Cut their supply! Make 'em hurt!" Tess's stomach twisted. Mom's face flashed in her mind. Elena's last hollow message, promising extraction that never came. Resentment simmered. She was no symbol, just a kid dodging patrols. But sabotage? The tower's guards were relentless, and failure meant reprisals. Families dragged out, like in the strikes that took her neighbors. "We watch first," Tess said firmly, her voice steadier than she felt. "Map the shifts. If we do this, it's smart. No heroes." The group nodded, tension thick as the humid air. Outside, the tower's lights flickered on, a beacon in the dusk. Tess gripped her makeshift knife, wondering if survival meant becoming the monsters they feared. Elena paced the command tent, the flap rustling in the evening gale. Arun's analysis burned in her mind. Weaponize the waters, share it with the global net, militias from the Mississippi to the Mekong, turning rivers into death traps. It could blunt the incursion, buy time for diplomacy, but the cost. Reprisals on river cities, civilians like Tess caught in the flood. She stopped, staring at the holomap. Busan's coast blinked red. Intermittent occupation, her daughter's zone. Sharing meant painting targets on those homes. Her divorce had left her protective to a fault. Duty warred with the ache of failure, the fear of losing the one light left. But hesitation had cost lives before. In soul. "Transmit," she told the comms officer, voice like iron. "Full dispersal. Arun's findings, tactical overlays. Warn of backlash. Evacuate where possible." The officer's eyes widened, but he complied. Elena sank into her chair, the decision settling like lead. Adaptation demanded everything, even if it drowned the world a little more. Arun watched the transmission ripple out from the base's antenna array, a digital wave carrying his equations to hidden cells worldwide. He'd drafted the memo with clinical precision: conductive grounding, current induction, seal vulnerabilities. Now it was loose, transforming every delta into a battlefield. He leaned against the lab wall, the warehouse's chill seeping through his coat. ethics gnawed. His puzzle-solving had armed the desperate, but at scale. Rivers ran red with potential. Zerathi walkers shorting out, yes, but human boats sunk in crossfire, cities flooded under siege. His arrogance stared back. Recognition tasted like ash. Was this understanding or just another blueprint for ruin? A runner burst in, face pale. "Ma'am, interrogation team's got a prisoner talking. Zerathi field officer." Elena arrived minutes later, Arun trailing. The tent reeked of sweat and fear, the alien bound to a chair, its exosuit stripped, mandibles twitching. The interrogator stepped back, nodding. The translator droned, "You flood our lines, weaponize your hydro systems against us, and now you dare lecture on restraint?" Kael'rith's mandibles clicked in irritation as the human commander's image flickered on the holographic relay, her face a mask of controlled fury. The bridge of the Zerathi cruiser hummed with the low thrum of hydro generators, feeding power to the orbital arrays. He leaned forward, his armored crest casting shadows across the console. "This is not lecture, Major Park. It is fact. Your primitives flood our sensor nets with debris, turn water into weapons. The Council will respond in kind." The connection severed with a sharp hiss, leaving Kael'rith staring at the blank display. His brood siblings stirred in the alcove behind him, their telepathic hum a mix of anticipation and unease. The war had dragged on longer than anticipated. Humans adapted too quickly, their ingenuity a thorn in the Dominion's side. But orders were orders, and restraint had its limits. A priority cipher blinked into his neural implant, encrypted from the High Council on Zerath Prime. Kael'rith isolated himself in the command sanctum, the walls sealing with a pneumatic sigh. The message unfolded in his mind. Campaign escalation to Rubicon status. Resistance clusters along riparian zones indicate deliberate fortification. Authorize localized ecosystem disruption to deny resources. Flash evaporation of select deltas permitted. Demonstrate inevitability. Preserve expeditionary assets. Rubicon. The word carried weight, a threshold crossed only in the direst suppressions. Kael'rith's primary hearts quickened. This wasn't mere intimidation. It was calculated ruin, turning the human's own lifeblood against them. He admired their tenacity, scattered brigades holding lines with scavenged tech, turning rivers into barriers, but admiration wouldn't sway the Council. His status, his brood's future, hinged on compliance. Failure meant exile or worse. He summoned the tactical overlay. Earth's river systems sprawled like veins. The Mississippi, the Yangtze, the Ganges. Clusters of human resistance glowed red along their banks. Evacuees, guerrillas, hidden factories. A major delta strike would evaporate water tables, salinate soils, force surrender. But Kael'rith's skepticism gnawed. The humans fought dirty, and overreach could provoke escalation. He selected the Irrawaddy Delta in Myanmar, sparsely populated now after early strikes had cleared the lowlands. Minimal civilian density, maximum psychological impact. Let them see their breadbaskets wither. Prepare the hydro-lance arrays, he ordered his second Vexar via implant. Target coordinates incoming. Limit yield to flash evaporation. No deep crustal penetration. Vexar acknowledged, but Kael'rith caught the ripple of doubt in their shared link. This will break them, he projected, more to convince himself. Or us. Elena Park hunched over the flickering console in the brigade's mobile HQ. A reinforced bunker carved into a hillside overlooking the Mekong tributaries. The air smelled of damp earth and overheating circuits, the hum of jury-rigged generators a constant underscore to the tension. Her team, Arun Mehta, tapping furiously at a Xenotech decoder, Maya Alvarez cleaning her rifle with methodical strokes, waited in the dim glow. Partial telemetry had trickled in from a downed Zerathi drone they'd salvaged 2 days back. Fragmented bursts of orbital positioning, Hydro's signature spikes aligning with river confluences. "It's a strike pattern," Arun said, his voice steady but edged with that intellectual thrill he couldn't quite hide. They're gearing up for something big. Hydro-lance arrays, massive energy beams to superheat water bodies. evaporate a delta, and you deny irrigation, fisheries, everything downstream for years. Elena's jaw tightened. The decoder spat out coordinates, Irrawaddy Delta. Not her sector, but close enough that fallout would ripple. Refugees flooding the Mekong, straining their already thin lines. Her daughter Tess was holed up in Da Nang, a coastal city turned ad hoc haven, and any Delta wipeout would send waves of displaced toward it. Duty pulled her one way, the raw ache of motherhood another. She couldn't afford to lose focus, not after the peacekeeping debacle in the Andes, bodies piled in the mud because she'd hesitated on a call. Options? She asked, keeping her tone clipped. The brigade was down to 300 effectives scattered in hidden outposts. Evacuate the projected impact zone? It'd light them up on sensors, draw the barges straight to them, or stay dark, attempt interception. Risky, but it could blunt the blow. Maya looked up from her rifle, eyes hard. Evac's a trap. They'll track the movement, pick us off piecemeal. We stay hidden, hit their approach vectors. I've got demo charges prepped, underwater variants, magnetic adhesion. Plant them along the barge routes, and when they lumber in for the strike, we turn their column into scrap. Elena met her gaze. Maya had that fire, born from losing her brother in the first demonstration orbital burn, but insistence bordered on recklessness. Those charges meant diving into contested waters, Zerathi patrol drones skimming the surface. Personal risks off the charts, Sergeant. You're talking suicide runs. Maya's lips twisted, not quite a smile. Better than watching another town boil away. Sabotage first, evac if it works. We've got the river on our side. They don't know its tricks like we do. Her voice cracked just a fraction, grief surfacing like silt. Elena saw the flaw there, Maya's need to strike back, to feel the control she'd lost when her brother vaporized. It mirrored her own fear of becoming the commander who sacrificed too much, who let the war hollow her out. Arun cleared his throat. She's right on the intercept, but we need more than charges. Their barges have hydroprocessing arrays, massive intakes that filter and weaponize water for their lances. Overload those and you get feedback cascades. I've modeled it. Spike the input with our EMP variants. Force a surge. Could chain react, poison the whole delta with their own electrolytes. Elena rubbed her temple, the weight settling. Overcharge meant contamination. Salts, heavy metals leaching into the soil, rendering the ecosystem toxic for generations. She'd be signing off on slow death not just for the enemy, but for the land her ancestors had tilled. Her mind flashed to Tess, scavenging in Da Nang's ruins, and the choice twisted deeper, prevent the strike or preserve a poisoned future. Decision time, she said finally. We go for intercept. Maya, your team plants the charges, minimal exposure. Arun, refine that overcharge plan. If it comes to it, she trailed off, the words sticking. If it comes to poisoning our own world. But hesitation had cost lives before. Greenlight prep, move out at dusk. In Da Nang, the salt air clung heavy, mixed with the acrid tang of unburied dead. Tess Park wiped sweat from her brow, distributing ration packs from a makeshift depot in the shadowed husk of a high-rise. The city had been a reluctant sanctuary, its ports jammed with fishing boats turned evac transports, its alleys a warren for the displaced. But now whispers from upstream towns had turned it into something more, an unintentional refuge for those fleeing river skirmishes. Families from the Mekong deltas trickled in, wide-eyed and hollow, carrying tales of Zerathi patrols scorching villages. More coming, old Mr. Nguyen muttered beside her, tallying water purifiers. His hands shook as he marked the ledger. Resources strained thin, canned fish dwindling, medkits empty. Tess's network of teens and elders had kept things hidden so far, signal jammers cobbled from drone parts, scouts on rooftops spotting alien flyovers. But the influx exposed cracks. A refugee convoy last night had tripped a proximity sensor, pinging faint alerts toward orbital watchers. Tess glanced at the horizon, where the South China Sea met the Han River's mouth. Her mom's last message, garbled 3 days old, spoke of holding the line upriver. Resentment bubbled. Elena treated her like a liability, a reason to pull punches when all Tess wanted was to fight back her way. Organize, survive, prove she wasn't just the daughter left behind. But as another group staggered in, mud-caked kids clutching sodden toys, she felt the exposure closing in. One wrong move, and the Zerathi would glass the whole coast. Double the watches, she told her group, and ration tighter. We're not breaking yet. A low rumble echoed from the north like distant thunder. Upstream trouble, bleeding south. Kael'rith's flagship barge led the column, a behemoth of iridescent alloy, slicing through the Irrawaddy's brackish flow. The delta's mangroves whispered against the hull, their roots a tangled defense the humans had yet to fully exploit. His bridge crew monitored the arrays charging, hydro lances humming to life. Vexar reported clear scans, no major resistance signatures, good. The sparsely populated zone would minimize backlash. Let the evaporation speak for itself. Force capitulation without the mess of full annihilation. But doubt lingered. Human signals had spiked oddly along the approaches. Decoy flares, perhaps, or something sharper. Kael'rith's implant fed him telemetry, barges holding formation, intakes priming for the flash. He admired the precision of it, the Dominion's tech turning water to steam in controlled fury, yet humans, they weaponized their desperation. If this broke them, fine. If not, Rubicon might demand more. Arrays at threshold, Vexar announced. Initiate in 30. Kael'rith nodded, mandibles set. Restraint or ruin, the choice narrowed. Elena crouched in the pre-dawn murk of a riverside thicket, her binocs trained on the approaching barge shadows. Maya's team had slipped into the water hours ago, vanishing like ghosts into the current. Radio silence held, but Elena's gut churned. Drones had buzzed closer than expected, forcing the dives deeper. Arun knelt beside her, his tablet linked to the EMP rig, a backpack launcher tuned to spike the barge's arrays. "They're in position," Arun whispered, eyes alight with the puzzle's edge. His arrogance showed in the calm, treating the war like equations to balance. But Elena saw the undercurrent, fear that his breakthrough would etch genocide into history books. Launch on my mark, it'll surge the intakes, overload the processors, chain reaction should... A muffled thump echoed upstream, then another, Maya's charges. The lead barge listed, hull venting steam as underwater blasts crumpled its stabilizers. Chaos rippled through the column, secondary detonations shearing intakes, barges grinding into shallows. "Now!" Elena barked. Arun triggered the EMPs, pulses arcing across the water like lightning strikes. The arrays lit up, feedback loops igniting in brilliant flares. But the overcharge hit uneven. Some processors shattered, crippling the column, but others vented wildly, spewing a toxic slurry of superheated electrolytes and destabilized chems. The river boiled, not just evaporated, but poisoned. A plume spread, iridescent and oily, snaking toward the delta's heart. Human refugees downstream, those Maya had wanted to evac, would choke on it first, lungs searing. Zerathi troops aboard the barges convulsed as the backlash hit, their exosuits failing against the brew. Elena lowered the binocs, the acrid smoke stinging her eyes. She'd greenlit this, chosen sabotage over salvation, contamination over clean defeat. The cost settled like lead, generations fishing dead waters, her hands stained with slow rot. Tess's city lay in the path. The plume would reach coasts by dawn. Maya surfaced nearby, gasping, blood trailing from a shrapnel gash. Maya's head broke the surface with a ragged gasp, water sluicing off her face as she clawed for the muddy bank. Blood from the shrapnel gash on her forehead mixed with the river's filth, streaking her cheeks like war paint. Elena reached out, hauling her up by the collar of her sodden fatigues, the two of them collapsing against the embankment. The air stank of scorched metal and chemical runoff. The delta's poison seeping into everything now, a desperate human gambit that had bought them hours but poisoned the land for generations. "You good?" Elena muttered, pressing a field dressing to Maya's wound. Her hands shook, not from the cold, but from the echo of the explosion that had nearly claimed them both. The Zerathi patrol boat was a smoldering wreck upstream, its crew scattered or drowned, but victory felt like ash in her mouth. Maya winced, nodding. Peachy, that was too close. If their scanners had picked up the toxin dispersal. They didn't, not in time. Elena scanned the horizon. The twisted mangroves silhouetted against a bruised sky. Her brigade had turned the delta into a kill zone, lacing the waterways with industrial-grade defoliants, scavenged from abandoned factories. It mirrored the aliens' own scorched earth tactics, and that realization gnawed at her. She was supposed to be the one holding the line with precision, not mirroring their brutality. But orders were orders, and hesitation meant more graves. Far across the poisoned sprawl, in the shadow of a hovering Zerathi command skiff, Kale Rith stood at the viewport, his armored form rigid as he surveyed the devastation below. The delta's waters, once a vibrant web of life, now shimmered with iridescent slicks. Human ingenuity at its most feral. Probes from his ship confirmed the contamination. Heavy metals, synthetic acids, bioagents that would render the ecosystem barren for cycles. It was ruthless, efficient, a mirror to the Dominion's own Rubicon protocols, those edicts of calculated annihilation designed to break worlds without wasting Imperial blood. He touched the comm panel, his mandibles clicking in quiet dissent. Humans weren't the primitives the Council painted them as. They adapted, they improvised, turning weakness into weapons that echoed the Empire's own doctrines. If this was their response to a single enforcement action, escalation would invite mutual ruin. Log this, he subvocalized to his adjunct. Field report. Human countermeasures in Sector Delta exhibit strategic parity with Rubicon thresholds. Recommend immediate revision. De-escalate to containment only. Full extermination risks overextension and ideological contamination. The message beamed upward through encrypted relays, a rare act of caution from a commander known for unflinching obedience. Kyle Rith's brood siblings depended on his status. Failure here could unravel their lineage, yet watching the Delta choke on its own defenses stirred an unwelcome admiration. These humans fought not with blind rage, but with the cold calculus of survival. It unsettled him, this echo of Zerathi resolve in alien flesh. Aboard the orbital bastion of the High Council, the descent arrived like a spark in dry tinder. The chamber hummed with holographic projections, counselors' forms flickering in the dim light of simulated starfields. Elder Vorth Kal, his carapace etched with service scars, dismissed the report with a wave of his primary claw. Hesitation from Kale Rith? He sees shadows where we see necessity. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The incursion was meant as discipline, a limited show of force to cow this upstart world into tributary status. But human resistance had poisoned a key resource node, denying the expeditionary force water purification for their ground units. Retaliation was inevitable. Approve the vapor strike, Vorth Kal intoned, his voice a gravelly decree. Target their coastal aggregation point. Overcrowded, vulnerable. Vaporize the harbor waters. Let them drown in their own desperation. The order cascaded down, a retaliatory thunderbolt aimed at the heart of human coastal resilience. No revision to the protocols, only escalation. In the dim basement of a half-collapsed apartment block in what was once Busan, Tess Park huddled over a jury-rigged radio, the static-laced broadcast crackling through stolen earbuds. The air was thick with salt and fear, the building's lower levels flooded from the last tidal surge. Around her, a ragged circle of survivors, mostly elders too frail to run, and a handful of teens like her waited in the flickering light of a solar lantern. Evacuation imperative. Inland routes compromised. Hostiles inbound. Repeat, all civilians to... The signal fragmented, hacked human frequencies fighting for airtime against alien jamming. Tess's fingers tightened on the receiver, her heart pounding. The city was a trap now, swollen with refugees from the initial strikes. Her mom was out there somewhere fighting in the interior, but Tess couldn't just wait for rescue that might never come. Mrs. Kim, an elderly neighbor with arthritis locking her knees, leaned forward. "What does it say, child? Are they coming?" Tess swallowed, piecing together the garbled words. Flee inland, through mined roads and alien patrols, or stay, fortify what little they had. The elders couldn't make the trek. They'd slow everyone down, become liabilities. But leaving them? That wasn't who she was. Not after watching her dad walk out years ago, choosing his career over family. "It's bad," she said finally, voice steady despite the knot in her gut. "They say head inland, but the paths are blocked. We could try the old sewer lines, but it's risky." The group stirred, eyes on her. She'd become the de facto leader by default. 16, quick with a knife from scavenging runs, and the only one not crumbling under the weight. Stay and help meant barricading here, rationing the dwindling supplies, facing whatever the aliens threw next, flee and abandon them to die alone. Tess's mind raced, resentment flaring at the world that forced this choice on her. Mom would say, "Protect the vulnerable," but Mom wasn't here, was she? "I'll scout the sewers first," Tess decided, forcing resolve into her tone. "If it's clear, we go together. No one gets left." It was a half-truth. Deep down, she knew some wouldn't make it. But turning her back? That would break something inside her she couldn't afford to lose. Hundreds of kilometers inland, Elena's command post buzzed with urgent pings, the holographic map flickering under emergency power. She wiped river mud from her face, still tasting the Delta's bitterness, when the alert hit. Incoming orbital strike, targeted at Busan. Her stomach dropped. Tess. Colonel Reyes's voice cut through the comms, grim and unyielding. "Park, we've got confirmation. Zarathi vapor strike, orbital lance boiling the harbor dry. Your daughter's sector is ground zero. High command splitting defenses. Redirect our missile batteries to Busan, or hold the line on the Han River Dam. That structure powers half our theater. Lose it, and the grid collapses. Lights out for the brigade. No more drone swarms, no EMP countermeasures. Your call, Major, but make it fast." Elena's vision tunneled, the room's chatter fading to a roar in her ears. The dam was strategic gospel, vital for the war effort, the backbone of their improvised grid jury-rigged from civilian reactors. Redirecting defenses meant stripping her own sector bare, inviting alien ground pushes that could overrun her unit. But Busan, Tess, her daughter, alone in that chaos, organizing stragglers like some pint-sized general. Elena's divorce had already cost Tess a stable home. She couldn't let this be the end. She gripped the console, knuckles white. Duty screamed for the dam, the broader war, humanity's survival. Personal instinct clawed for Busan, for the one life that anchored her through the nightmares of past failures. "Reyes, Before she could finish, Maya burst into the tent, bandaged but unbowed, her eyes sharp with the clarity of someone who'd stared down death in the river. "Major, don't even think it. The dam's non-negotiable. That grid feeds our artillery, our field hospitals, the whole damn front. Lose it, and we're blind. Zarathi walkers roll right over us. Busan's a tragedy, but it's one city. Sacrifice it, and we keep fighting tomorrow." Elena's jaw tightened. The words landing like blows. Maya had lost her brother to an early strike. She knew the sting of personal loss, yet here she was, pressing the cold math. "It's my daughter, Maya. You asking me to write her off?" "I'm asking you to win this," Maya shot back, voice low but fierce, no room for sentiment. "We've poisoned rivers, turned our own land toxic to stop them. You think the aliens care about one girl's life? Prioritize the war, or we're all ghosts. Elena, Major, think of the brigade. Think of everyone depending on that power." The tent felt smaller, the weight of command crushing. Elena met Maya's gaze, seeing the grief-fueled steel there, the same pragmatism that had kept them alive in the Delta. But it twisted something in her, this demand to choose abstraction over blood. She nodded curtly, hating the necessity. "Hold the dam. Batteries stay." Across the base, in the dim glow of a secure lab trailer, Dr. Aaron Mehta watched the order scroll across his terminal. his fingers hovering over the reroute console. Officially, the defenses were locked. Full coverage on the Han Dam, but Busan, overcrowded, desperate, a symbol of human stubbornness. And Elena's daughter was there. He'd seen the strain in her eyes during briefings, the way she balanced strategy with unspoken fear. Aaron's arrogance had always been his blind spot, treating war like a theorem to solve, lives as variables. But this? Rerouting even a fraction of the assets meant defying chain of command, siphoning power that could trigger blackouts in Elena's sector. Risky, potentially catastrophic, yet his research on Zerathi psychology screamed for restraint. Escalation bred monsters on both sides. And damn it, recognition be damned. He couldn't let this be the moment humanity mirrored their invaders without a fight. With a breath, he initiated the override, shunting secondary batteries toward Busan. Alarms flickered but didn't escalate. His backdoor hacks held. Partial shield, enough to blunt the strike, maybe save a pocket of lives. But the cost. Rolling blackouts inbound, his betrayal exposed if it went south. Arun leaned back, pulse racing, the puzzle now a gamble with real blood. The strike came at dawn, a searing lance from orbit that turned Busan's harbor into a cauldron of steam and fire. Waters boiled away in an instant, the shock waves shattering seawalls and hurling debris like shrapnel storms. Tess and her group were hunkered in the basement when the world shook, the radio dying in a whine of overload. Plaster rained down as the building groaned, the elders clutching each other amid screams. Outside, the city convulsed. Skyscrapers tilting into the vapor cloud, refugees caught in the blast radius vaporized or scalded. But the partial defenses kicked in. Improvised missile swarms rerouted from Arun's quiet sabotage intercepted the lance's core, diffusing the beam enough to spare the inner districts. Tess coughed through the acrid fog seeping in, hauling Mrs. Kim to her feet. We made it, some of us. The seawall held just enough. Not all. Screams echoed from the streets. The cost tallied in charred bodies and shattered lives. But survival, ragged and partial, burned in Tess's chest, a defiance born of choice, not chance. In Elena's, the river stretched like a scarred vein through the continent's heart, its waters churning under a sky bruised by drone swarms and orbital flares. Major Elena Park stood on the command overlook, a makeshift platform of shipping containers and razor wire perched above the canyon's lip. Below, the Mississippi's grand complex of dams, locks, and canals had become a fortress of desperation. Earth's fractured militaries, UN remnants, NATO holdouts, and ad hoc coalitions from Asia to the Americas had funneled their survivors here, the last natural choke point before the aliens' push inland. Engineers from every corner had labored through the night, rigging the infrastructure into a gauntlet of death. Pressure mines in the locks, automated turrets along the spillways, and canal banks laced with anti-grav disruptors scavenged from downed Zerathi scouts. The air hummed with the low growl of generators, and the scent of diesel mixed with the metallic tang of fear sweat from the troops below. Elena's boots crunched on gravel as she scanned the horizon through her binocs. Zerathi landing pods had been dropping like meteors for days, their riverborne divisions probing the waterways with sleek, armored barges that skimmed the surface on repulsor fields. But this was it, the line they couldn't afford to lose. Her comms crackled and General Harlan's voice cut through, gravelly from too many sleepless nights. "Park, you're in charge down there. Full ground command. Hold the river or we all drown in the fallout." She lowered the binocs, her stomach twisting. Overall charge. The words landed heavy, like the weight of the dam's concrete walls behind her. Elena had led squads through urban hellscapes before, but this, commanding a defense that spanned kilometers with civilians packed into upstream bunkers and downstream evac zones hanging by threads. Her mind flashed to Busan, her old posting, now a smoldering ruin from the Zerathi's disciplinary strikes. Tess's city. The partial destruction had come in waves, orbital lances carving through districts, leaving her daughter in that god-forsaken coastal maze. Elena's ex had gotten Tess out initially, but comms had gone dark weeks ago. Was she still breathing? huddled in some shelter, resenting the mother who'd chosen duty over family. And then there was Maya. Sergeant Alvarez paced the platform's edge, her engineer's toolkit slung low, eyes like chipped flint. She'd lost her brother in that first Busan barrage, a demonstration, the aliens called it. Maya had been patrolling those downstream villages back then, rigging bridges and water stations. Now, with the river defense online, blackouts rippled through the grid every time they surged power to the kill zones. Lights flickered in the towns below, hospitals going dark, families groping in the gloom. "This setup's gonna fry everything south of here," Maya had snarled earlier, slamming a fist on a tactical holomap. "My people down there, they're already scraping by. You pull the plug for good, and it's on us." Resentment simmered in her voice, not outright mutiny, but a fracture Elena couldn't ignore. Maya was her best improv specialist, the one who turned scrap into savagery, but grief had sharpened her into something volatile. Elena nodded to Harlan's sign-off, pocketing the comm. "Sergeant, get your teams on the secondary locks. Double-check the floodgates." Maya shot her a look, wary, probing, but saluted and moved off, barking orders to a cluster of engineers hauling cable. The command tent buzzed with urgency when Arun Mehta arrived, his lab coat rumpled under a flak vest, carrying a tablet that glowed with simulations. The xenologist had been holed up in a mobile lab upstream, dissecting captured Zerathi tech, their repulsors that defied gravity, energy lances that sliced armor like paper. But Arun's mind worked puzzles, not people. His arrogance showed in the way he adjusted his glasses, assuming the room would bend to his logic. "Elena," he said, voice clipped as he synced the tablet to the central display. "We've got one play left if they breach the canyon corridor, the main dam, Hoover's big sister upriver. We overload its core reactors, trigger a cascade failure, artificial flood. The water surges down the canal system, hits the Narrows like a hammer, drowns their riverborne divisions in the choke point." The tent fell silent, holograms bloomed, blue torrents roaring through the canyon, Zerathi barges capsizing under walls of foam, elite troops, those chitin-armored horrors with their phase-shifting shields, swept away like debris. But the sim didn't stop there. The flood spilled beyond, swallowing downstream towns, villages with clapboard homes, refugee camps, the very places Maya had sworn to protect. Thousands, maybe more, gone in minutes. Elena's throat tightened. "Casualties?" Arun's eyes flicked to the numbers scrolling red. "High, but tactical. Their advance halts cold. We buy time for the orbital counterstrike." He paused. A flicker of something, regret, crossing his face. Arun craved the breakthrough, the proof his xenology could turn the tide, but he knew the blueprint he offered skirted genocide. Humans weaponizing their own world against invaders who saw Earth as an unruly province to pacify. She leaned in, tracing the flood path on the hollow. Viable insertion? Inside the dam complex. Sabotage the controls manually. Remotes are jammed by their EW fields. Arun's voice steadied, puzzle solved. One team, in and out. Maya, who'd slipped back into the tent, stepped forward. Her face was a mask, but her hands clenched at her sides. "I'll lead it. My engineers know the guts of that place, patrolled it for years." She met Elena's gaze, unflinching. "Triggering it, it'll wipe those villages, folks I pulled out of floods before. Kids, elders." A beat, her voice dropping. "But if it stops the bugs cold, I'll light the fuse." Elena saw the cost etching deeper into Maya's features, the numbness creeping in, grief twisting into resolve. Maya volunteered not from blind loyalty, but because hesitation meant more brothers lost, more cities like Busan. "Gear up," Elena said finally, "but we confirm the path first, no ghosts in the machine." Far downstream in the salt-stung ruins of the coastal zone, Tess Park wiped sweat from her brow and shouldered her pack. The city was a skeleton now, skyscrapers gutted by lance strikes, streets choked with rubble and the husks of abandoned vehicles. Zerathi patrols had pulled back after their discipline, leaving enforcer drones to buzz the perimeter, but the real threat was the chaos within. Looters, starvation, the endless wail of sirens from failing hospitals. Tess had organized a knot of survivors, teens like her, scavenging meds and water, elders sharing stories to keep the fear at bay. But staying meant waiting for the next wave. Her mother's face, stern, distant from old holocalls, flashed in her mind. Duty first, always. Tess resented it, the way Elena's choices left her here, a symbol of resilience in broadcasts that treated her like a prop. A convoy horn blared from the outskirts, UN relief trucks, armored and rumbling, heading upriver to safer zones. "We're moving," Tess told her group, voice steady despite the knot in her gut. "Stick close." They slipped through a breached seawall, dodging drone sweeps and hitched onto the tail of the line. The trucks groaned under crates of rations, civilians piling in, families clutching bundles, a few soldiers waving them aboard. No one mentioned the river ahead, the dams holding back the inland floods. Tess climbed into a flatbed, the engine's vibration rumbling through her bones as they rolled north, the ocean fading behind, upriver toward whatever passed for hope. Aboard the Zarathi command barge, Kael'rith gripped the rail of the bridge deck, his mandibles clicking in quiet rhythm. The canyon corridor loomed ahead, its walls sheer and mist-shrouded, the human river snaking through like a vein pulsing with traps. His elite divisions, riverborne shock troops, their exosuits gleaming under the false sun of orbital lights, massed on a dozen barges, repulsors humming as they formed up. Probes had mapped the defenses, crude but layered, human ingenuity turning water into weapon. Kael'rith admired it. In the way a strategist respects a worthy foe, humans didn't break like lesser species, they adapted, twisted the environment against you, but doubts gnawed, subtle as a brood sibling's whisper. The High Council demanded swift pacification, no escalation, just enough force to cow the primitives into submission. Yet his reports of human ferocity had drawn scrutiny, whispers of weakness if he faltered. His brood waited on the core worlds, status tied to his victories. Fail here and they unraveled. "Commit the divisions," he ordered, voice resonant through the comnet. "Full advance. Breach the dams if needed. We prove order through strength." The barges surged forward, cutting wakes that foamed white. Kael'rith watched the canyon swallow them, resolve hardening against the unease. Loyalty demanded victory, even if it tasted of overreach. Back at the Overlook, Elena's world narrowed to the tactical feed. Hours blurred into a grind of repositioning artillery, calibrating drone swarms, Maya's team vanishing into the dam's shadowed underbelly via a service tunnel. Arun monitored from the tent, tweaking sims as Zarathi signatures flooded the sensors, hundreds strong elite signatures pulsing like heartbeats. Then the alert hit. Civilian convoy, upriver, threading the projected floodplain. Elena's blood went cold as the drone feed patched in, grainy but unmistakable. Tess, her daughter wedged in the back of a truck, face smudged with dirt, oblivious to the doom arcing toward her. The convoy had veered into the kill zone, bridges out, no way across the swollen river. Detonation in 20 minutes. Maya's team in position, thumb on the overload. "Elena," Arun said, voice tight. "Abort windows closing. Flood hits them square." She stared at the screen, heart hammering. Tess's eyes, those same stubborn eyes from childhood, locked on the camera for a split second, as if sensing the gaze. Abort, and the Zarathi poured through, shredding the line, Busan repeating on a continental scale. Trigger it, and her own blood paid the price. Maya's resentment echoed in her mind, the villages downstream, the blackout's long shadow. But duty wasn't clean. It was this, the knife's edge where love fractured against survival. "May," Elena said into the comm, voice steel over the static. "Trigger on schedule, flood 'em out." The line went silent, then Maya's affirmation. "Copy, for the line." Broadcast feeds flickered across the command net, global eyes on the river, the convoy's plight beaming out in real time. Tess's truck mired on the wrong bank, water rising in the distance as the dam groaned its death. Elena turned from the screen, the canyon erupting in chaos below, barges twisting in the first surges, Kael'rith's forces caught in the deluge. Victory clawed from sacrifice, but the cost carved deep. a scar no strategy could heal. The roar of the river swallowed everything. Elena gripped the edge of the command console, her knuckles white against the unyielding metal, as the feeds erupted in static-laced fury. Below the canyon rim, the dam's final breach unleashed hell, a wall of churning brown water, laced with the debris of shattered Zerathi barges and human barricades surging downstream like a living beast. It tore through the narrow valley, swallowing patrol skiffs whole, their sleek hulls crumpling under the pressure. Zerathi soldiers, those chitin-armored figures she'd studied in briefings, clawed at the air from sinking platforms, their plasma lances sputtering uselessly in the flood. Logistics hubs along the banks vanished in seconds, supply pods bloating and bursting like overripe fruit. But the cost clawed back just as viciously. The broadcast feeds cut to the convoy route, Tess's sector, where the water's vanguard slammed into evacuation lines. Trucks flipped like toys, their cargo of families spilling into the torrent. Settlements that had held out for weeks, clusters of prefab homes and refugee camps Elena had sworn to shield, eroded in the deluge, roofs peeling away to reveal frantic silhouettes before the current claimed them. The river, once a vein of life, now a weapon turned on its maker. Elena's breath caught, her daughter's face flashing in her mind. Not the broadcasts, but the last hollow call, Tess's defiant grin masking the fear. The canyon below blurred through the haze of her own rising bile. Victory, yes, but this was drowning the world to save it. Far upstream in the bucking shell of his command craft, Kale Rith fought the controls with all four limbs, the vessel's hull groaning as the flood's edge battered it sideways. Alarms wailed in staccato bursts, red lights pulsing across the cockpit like arterial blood. He'd seen the human sabotage coming. Probes had flagged the dam's structural whispers, but not this scale, not the raw calculus of flooding their own heartland to gut his legions. The craft listed, water sheeting over the viewport, and he glimpsed the carnage. Entire cohorts of his broodkin, disciplined phalanxes reduced to flailing shadows in the maelstrom. A supply flotilla, the backbone of their push into the lowlands, splintered against submerged boulders, munitions igniting in muffled booms that sent geysers skyward. Drowning, his people, engineered for vacuum and plasma, undone by water's primal weight. The craft slammed into a ridge, sparks flying as inertial dampers failed. Kale Rith's harness bit into his carapace, pain lancing through his secondary nerves. He stabilized her with a burst from the maneuvering thrusters, but the damage log scrolled doom, propulsion offline, comms flickering. Survivors? A fraction, maybe? The river had claimed the rest, logistics severed like a severed limb. No advance now, no disciplinary show of force, just retreat or ruin. His mandibles clicked in frustration. The High Council's edicts echoing in his mind. Intimidate, do not annihilate. But this, humanity's ferocity had rewritten the board. With a surge of resolve that bordered on treason, he patched into the secure relay, fingers dancing over the console. High Council, this is Kale Rith. The human countermeasure has altered parameters. Request immediate ceasefire authorization. Casualties exceed thresholds. Further engagement risks imperial overextension. Unauthorized, yes, but silence from them now meant watching his forces bleed out in a mud-choked grave. Back at the forward ops bunker, buried in the canyon's lee, the air thickened with the stink of sweat and recycled oxygen. Elena paced the dim-lit room, screens alive with aftermath, satellite overlays showing the flood's scar, a swollen artery carving through farmlands and Zerathi forward bases alike. Cheers had died hours ago, replaced by the low murmur of analysts tallying losses. Then the doors hissed open, and Dr. Arun Mehta burst in, his lab coat smeared with console grime, face drawn tight under the harsh fluorescence. Global feeds were already lighting up, outrage from neutral zones, accusations of ecocide hurled at Earth's command. "They'll crucify us," Arun muttered, slamming a tablet down. "Beijing's demanding your head, Elena. The flood wiped out 3 million in projected evac paths. Tess's convoy, gone, all of it." Elena's gut twisted, but she forced her voice steady. Show me the numbers on their side. Arun hesitated, then synced his device to the main display. Holomaps bloomed. Zirathi riverine forces reduced by 80%. Supply lines fractured across 1,000 kilometers. Their vaunted adaptive hulls meant nothing against hydrostatic crush. Troop carriers lay inverted in the silt. Power signatures flatlined. "It's not just bodies," Arun said, his voice gaining edge, the intellectual fire cutting through his fatigue. Their logistics were river-dependent, barges for everything from munitions to medical pods. Crippled. We've made pacification here a black hole for resources. If they push, it drains the Dominion's flanks elsewhere. Empires like theirs don't bleed for one backwater. They cut losses to safeguard the core. The room fell quiet as the implications sank in. Outrage be damned. This was leverage, cold and quantifiable. Elena nodded, the weight of it settling like lead in her chest. Arun's arrogance, that puzzle solver's gleam in his eye, had birthed this proof. But at what price? He met her gaze, unflinching, the man who once railed against weaponizing xenotech, now its architect. "They'll withdraw," he said flatly, "or escalate to orbit and risk their own stability. Your call forced their hand." The bunker trembled faintly as aftershocks rippled from the canyon, but it was the rotor whine outside that pulled Elena to the viewport. Dust devils swirled in the settling haze, and there, Maya's squad, or what was left of it, stumbling from a battered dropship. She looked like hell, fatigues torn, face streaked with mud and blood, cradling an arm slung in hasty field dressing. Behind her, 8 survivors out of 20 hauling gear, and the wounded on improvised stretchers. Elena pushed through the airlock, the dry wind biting her skin as she met them halfway. Maya's eyes, usually sharp with that engineer's precision, were hollowed out. "Dam's done," she rasped, dropping her pack with a thud that scattered tools. "Charges placed clean, but their counterfire pinned us. Lost Ruiz and the twins in the blast zone." She straightened, wincing, and fixed Elena with a stare that carried no deference. "Heard the feeds on the way back. Villages downriver, Pueblo Viejo, the ones I rigged bridges for last month, washed clean. Kids I pulled from rubble, elders who fed my team, all gone." Elena's throat tightened. Maya had been her rock, the one who turned grief into grit after her brother's strike. But now that fire turned inward, scorching. "It bought us time, Maya. Their forces." "Time?" Maya's laugh was bitter, stripped of humor. "You drowned our own to clip their wings. I followed orders, ma'am. But don't ask me to salute this." She stepped closer, voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "You're still CO, I'll hold the line, but personally. That loyalty's buried with those villages." The words hung like shrapnel, and Elena felt the fracture. Camaraderie under fire, yes, but trust eroded by the flood's unforgiving truth. Maya turned away, barking at her squad to unload, leaving Elena in the dust, the cost of command etching deeper. Hours blurred into a fragile dawn, the sky bruised purple over the receding waters. Rescue ops had launched at first light, a patchwork of human drones and opportunistic Zirathi lifters. Ceasefire or not, survival demanded uneasy truces. Elena monitored from the bunker, her focus splintering every time a ping marked a find. Then a breakthrough. Thermal clusters on elevated rooftops. A knot of structures lashed together by desperate hands in what was once a coastal suburb. Tess's last known position, the mixed team, human medics rappelling from choppers, Zirathi auxiliaries in battered exosuits bridging gaps with their grav pads, closed in. Elena's comm crackled with the lead tech's voice. Visual on survivors, teens, elders, about 24. One matches the park girl profile. Holofeed patched through Tess, soaked and shivering on a jury-rigged perch of linked roofs, directing a chain of hands passing supplies from a floating crate. Her face, gaunt but fierce, turned to the rescuers, not fear but wary assessment. A Zirathi medic extended a manipulator arm, offering a thermal blanket. Tess took it, nodding curtly, even as a human pulled her into a harness. As the first evac birds lifted off, The image burned into Elena, her daughter alive, but changed, organizing in the ruins, a symbol etched in floodwater, not just survival, but the raw overlap of vulnerability. Zirathi and human both stripped bare by the same deluge, hands reaching across the divide not from mercy, but necessity. Elena exhaled, the knot in her chest loosening a fraction, even as global nets lit up with the story. Tess Park, the commander's daughter, pulled from the brink by enemy aid. Shared fragility, a crack in the war's armor. By midday, the emergency channels hummed with tentative pings. Kel Rith's surviving staff, voices clipped and formal, proposing parley. Elena sealed herself in the comm shack, the air humming with static as she linked in. Their lead envoy, a sub-commander with Kyle Rith's insignia scarred but intact, projected a hollow of the alien's craft, limping toward neutral airspace. Commander Park, the voice translated smoothly, the deluge has equalized losses. My superior extends terms. Zirathi withdrawal to perimeter orbits, Earth demilitarized in key zones. In exchange, a joint declaration, mutual deterrence achieved, no victor proclaimed. Elena's fingers hovered over the accept glyph, the brutality of it sinking in. No triumph, just a scarred stalemate. Earth's rivers poisoned for generations, settlements erased, but the Dominion checked, their empire's edges blunted. Accepted, she said, voice steady, on condition of immediate aid corridors, no more discipline. The channel went silent, then affirmed. Ceasefire locked, the first fragile thread of peace woven from mutual ruin. Weeks ground into months. Earth exhaling in ragged celebration. Cities that had hunkered under blackouts threw lights skyward, crowds gathering in plazas to toast the brink's edge. We held, the broadcasts crowed, fireworks blooming over rebuilt dams, hollow gestures against the ecological fracture. Rivers ran silty and wrong, farmlands salinized, species flushed into extinction. Elena watched from a forward outpost, Tess safe in a relocation camp, but distant, her hugs laced with unspoken accusations. Arun buried himself in reports, his breakthroughs hailed as salvation, yet his eyes carried the weight of the drowned. Maya drilled her unit with mechanical efficiency, loyalty to chain of command intact, but the personal bridge burned cold. In quiet hours, Elena walked the canyon's altered rim, the river below a sluggish ghost of itself. Banks scarred with wreckage. Was this triumph, humanity's ingenuity turning the tide, defiance earned in blood and mud, or proof they'd mirrored the Zirathi, ruthless when cornered, willing to shatter their own world to make an empire flinch? The question gnawed, no clean answer in the wind-whipped silence. Restraint or survival. The line blurred, and crossing it left scars no treaty could erase. Years later, as new storms lashed the